So today, our mission comes from this document you shared, Marta Automobile Factory from Arad.
Right.
And it promises to be, well, quite the exploration. Arad, probably not the first place that springs to mind when you think early car manufacturing, right?
Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly why it's so interesting. It fits right in with that idea of uncovering these sort of hidden histories, these surprise facts.
Exactly. So we're heading back to the turn of the 20th century. Europe's buzzing with car innovation.
Yeah, a really dynamic time.
And smack dab in the middle, we find Marta, M-A-R-T-A, Magyar Automobil Rezveni Társaság Arad.
The Hungarian Automobile Joint Stock Company of Arad, quite a name.
It is. And this wasn't just some small local thing. They were pioneers, really, in the Hungarian car industry at the time.
And what's really fascinating starting out is just how industrially switched on Arad was then. It wasn't some sleepy town.
Right.
The document points out it was one of the first places in the whole region to get a horse-drawn tram.
Right.
We're talking 1869.
Wow, 1869. So right up there with Budapest, Timisoara, maybe even Lipova.
Yeah, possibly. So they were already thinking about modern transport quite early on.
Okay, so let's paint that picture. Arad's moving forward, railways, city planning, education, industry. But then there's this twist, isn't there? What the document calls the Arad paradox.
Mm-hmm.
While other cities jumped on electric trams, Arad hesitated, declined even. Seems a bit odd for a progressive city.
It does, and it really shows how progress isn't always a straight line. You know, the document suggests it boils down to this really long contract they had, like 60 years with the horse-drawn tram guy.
60 years, okay, that's commitment.
Right. So the mayor back then, Szalagskula, and the ones after him, they felt sort of legally and maybe ethically bound by it.
Okay.
So sticking to that old deal, which looks like resisting progress, actually kind of accidentally opened up a space for something totally new. Exactly. The car industry. It's a great example of how things you don't expect can end up shaping innovation.
Talk about a detour leading to a main road. No electric trams, boom, automobiles.
Yeah.
And the document says news was spreading, right? About this first car designed over at the Győr Wagon Works. Did like a 2,000-kilometer test run.
Impressive for the time, yeah. And that news definitely reached Arad. Plus, there was already a solid connection there.
Between Arad and Győr.
Yeah, the Johann Weitzer Wagon Works in Arad was basically a sister company to the one in Győr. They were in the same business circles.
Okay, so the groundwork was kind of laid. Existing industry, shared connections.
Precisely. That existing network, plus all the buzz about these newfangled automobiles, probably made Arad a pretty receptive place for the idea of building cars.
Which leads to talks with Westinghouse, the French subsidiary, to set up a factory in Arad.
That's the next step. Negotiations to build a car and engine factory right there.
But it wasn't smooth sailing, apparently. The local paper, Aradi Kuzluni, called the negotiations very troubled and difficult.
Yeah, sounds like it took some effort, but they got there in the end. It was officially incorporated November 28th, 1908.
In the full name again?
Magyar Automobil Rezveni Társaság Westinghouse Rendszer.
Rolls off the tongue. And what were they planning to build? Just cars?
Well, that's interesting. Their initial scope was incredibly wide, not just passenger cars at all. The official object was, automobiles for railways or other purposes, running on petrol and gasoline for the transport of tourists, persons, and goods, manufacture, repair, assembly, sale, and other marketing of rail cars, their parts and accessories, or carrying out various operations in the mechanical industry.
Wow! So cars, buses, trucks, rail cars, basically anything that moved with an engine?
Pretty much. They were covering a lot of bases right from the start. A very ambitious plan.
Ambitious, yeah. And it wasn't just a pipe dream, was it? There was serious money behind this.
Oh, absolutely. Initial share capital was 2 million kroner. That was a lot of money back then.
Shows real commitment. And the city of Arad itself chipped in.
Big time. They gave the land for the factory for free, plus a 15-year tax exemption.
15 years. Nice.
And on top of that, the city council actually bought shares, 300,000 crowns worth.
Yep.
So, strong local belief in the project.
And not just local, right? Budapest saw the potential, too.
Yes, the capital city recognized Arad's economic strength. They gave a subsidy of 150,000 crowns.
And specifically because it was Arad.
Explicitly, yeah.
Yeah.
Citing Arad's potential as the reason for picking it for Hungary's first car factory really highlights how important Arad was economically at that point.
It really does. In 1908, the year Marta gets going. That's a landmark year globally, too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Crucial year. As the document notes, that's the year Henry Ford launches the Model T in Detroit.
The car that changed everything. Mass production, low price.
Exactly. Set to revolutionize transport worldwide.
And here's where it gets really interesting. There's an Arad connection to the Model T itself.
This is amazing, yeah. Ghulam Yusuf, the main guy behind the Model T's design, reportedly from Moscow nearby, seems he got funding to study abroad, partly from the Weitzer factory in Arad.
No way. So the factory that's connected to Marta helped fund the guy who designed the Model T.
It appears so. It's just astonishing that local link to such a pivotal moment in car history.
Yeah.
Shows how these local things can have these, global ripples.
That's incredible. And 1908 was busy in Arad even beyond Marta starting up.
Oh, yeah. Before Marta even started producing cars, Arad already had the country's first bus company starting up and the region's first driving school.
Seriously, so they were really getting ready for the car age.
Totally. They were proactive. The plan was to use 7 buses they bought back in 1907 from the Westinghouse factory in Le Havre, France. One even did a test run to Arad that year.
So Arad wasn't just waiting for Marta, they were already embracing motorized transport.
Exactly. Paving the way.
Okay, so while all this is happening in Arad, the wider car world is moving fast too. The document gives a quick snapshot.
Yeah, the context is important.
Carl Benz's three-wheeler back in 1886. Daimler's four-wheeler in 89.
Mercedes hitting 80 kilometers around 1900, getting the steering wheel.
The H-pattern gearbox, windscreens showing up.
Basic stuff we take for granted now was cutting edge then. Windscreen wipers only came in around 1910.
And the cars themselves are pretty basic, right? Handbrakes, solid tires on wooden wheels.
Yeah, very much the early days. Solid rubber on wooden spokes. Definitely a different driving experience.
Okay, back to Arad. Marta gets its land. Good spot near the Weitzer wagon plant.
Strategically located, yeah.
Yeah.
Close to existing expertise and infrastructure.
And the factory building itself sounds pretty modern for 1908, 1909.
It really was. They used concrete iron supports and floors designed by a local Arad firm, Fodor Reisinger. That was advanced stuff.
And the main workshop.
Impressive. 3 big halls, glass roof, what they call the American system. Probably meant lots of light, good workflow, easy supervision. About 60 by 40 meters, 10 meters high.
Sounds substantial. And the mayor, Varjasi Lajos, was pleased. Sent a thank you telegram for the government subsidy.
Yeah, shows the local leadership was fully behind it. Real citywide buy-in.
And it wasn't just local enthusiasm. Experts from Budapest were impressed too.
They were. Engineers and professors from the Technical University visited in 1909. Apparently, they were really taken with the design and build quality, saw a lot of promise.
That must have felt good. External validation.
Definitely a confidence booster. The first general manager was Dicker Yusuf, brought over from Westinghouse in France.
And they got producing pretty quickly. Started with assembly.
Yeah, initially assembling Westinghouse cars, trucks, chassis using parts imported from France, but they didn't stick with that for long.
Moved on to their own designs.
Pretty quickly, yes. Started making their own 30 and 40 horsepower cars.
LE, right. Fetestarke, German for horsepower.
Right. And trucks, too, 5 and 10 tons. Even buses, 15 and 30 feeters, double-deckers.
Double-decker buses in Arad.
Yeah. Mail vans, double-decker omnibuses, and incredibly railway engines as well.
Railway engines. That's an incredibly diverse lineup for a new car company.
It really is. Speaks volumes about their ambition and probably the skills they could tap into locally, maybe from Weitzers.
Must have been. And they weren't just making them, they were getting noticed, weren't they?
They were. Big success in 1912. Won the Archduke Joseph's Gold Cup at the Royal Hungarian Automobile Club competition, plus an honorary diploma.
That's major recognition. Huge boost for their reputation.
Absolutely. And they set up a main office in Budapest on Pava Street. By 1913, get this, 250 Marta cars were running as taxis in Budapest.
250? That's a massive fleet. They really made inroads into the capital.
Shows really rapid growth and market penetration. But, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Like many startups, they hit bumps.
Ah, okay. What happened?
A big crisis hit in 1911. The French Westinghouse factory, which they still had ties to, almost went bankrupt.
Oof. That must have caused problems for Arad, relying on parts, maybe financial links.
Undoubtedly. It sounds like it could have been fatal for Marta. A serious threat.
But how did they pull through?
They got rescued. The Hungarian resin company stepped in and basically took over Marta's debts.
Okay, a lifeline. But it meant changes.
Big changes. Complete management shakeup. The entire leadership team resigned, including the workshop manager, Fijis Geno, apparently a big name, a real specialist.
So, new blood at the top. Who came in?
They appointed Haltenberger Samo as the new general manager, another well-respected expert.
Right. And it seems Arad was becoming a bit of a talent incubator in the car world.
It really seems like it. Haltenberger's time there was clearly valuable. Just a couple of years later, in 1914, he moved to Budapest to run the auto taxi joint stock company.
The company using all those Marta taxis.
Presumably, yeah. And he took his chief engineer, Bizerman Eugen, with him.
So, like the document says, Arad was a launching pad for these guys.
Exactly. A place where key figures got experience before moving on to bigger roles, it seems.
But even with all this turbulence, Marta kept going, producing vehicles up until World War I.
Yeah, despite the difficulties, they kept manufacturing. Even did special orders for the Hungarian post office. But then came another major shift. Ownership changed.
Ah, who took over?
In 1912, Austro-Daimler acquired the Arad factory.
Austro-Daimler, okay. Big name. Did production continue?
It did. Under Austro-Daimler, the document mentions they produced 87 cars and, quite a lot more, 730 trucks.
Wow, mostly trucks then. And they still worked with the Weitzer factory nearby.
Seems so. Continued collaboration, leveraging that local industrial synergy. Weitzer was a huge employer in Arad, remember?
Right. Now there's this other little story tucked in here, kind of charming and unexpected, about an early pilot.
Oh, yeah. Dobos Isfan in 1913. This is great.
He tried to fly his plane to Arad, but had to make an emergency landing.
Yeah, engine trouble forced him down. And guess who helps him out? Let me guess. The Marta guys. Specialists from the Marta factory. They apparently had zero experience with airplane engines.
But they fixed it.
They figured it out, diagnosed the problem, repaired it. The next day, Dobos took off and did a successful demonstration flight over Arad.
That's fantastic. Automotive engineers fixing an airplane engine in 1913 shows real ingenuity.
Doesn't it? A wonderful example of that early tech crossover and problem-solving spirit.
But then, the war. World War I looms large. That must have hit Marta hard.
Inevitably. All those Marta trucks we mentioned, requisitioned for the Army.
And they never came back.
Sadly, no. Lost to the war effort. And the factory itself, basically drafted into military service.
Switched production.
Gradually, yeah. Shifted over to making aircraft parts and eventually whole aircraft. It's quite something, this car factory ending up involved in making the first Romanian planes. Shows how industry adapts in wartime.
Amazing adaptability. But the Marta name, as an independent car maker, that eventually faded.
It did. The final step was in 1925 when the Marta factory merged with the Astra wagon factory.
And today, any Marta cars left in Arad?
Regrettably, it seems not. None are known to survive there. A real shame how this significant piece of history has physically vanished.
A reminder of how things pass. But Arad's link to cars didn't completely die out then, did it?
Not entirely. The document mentions a sort of revival in the 1930s. Arad gets back on the auto map, but differently.
How so?
A Ford representative office for Romania set up shop there, operating out of the Yablonci-Buston workshops.
Ah, Ford, so sales and service.
More than just sales. They were doing repairs, reconditioning vehicles too, keeping automotive skills alive in the city.
And even after nationalization later on, those skills persisted.
Apparently so. The specialists from that Ford dealership ended up continuing their work at a local lathe factory. The expertise didn't just evaporate.
Which brings us sort of full circle thinking about Marta's legacy today. The document makes a strong point about remembering it, especially around the 110th anniversary.
Absolutely. It feels like the right time to commemorate this. The idea of a plaque, maybe restoring the old administrative building.
That pavilion building, yeah. It's important industrial heritage.
It really is. And given that the city itself was an original shareholder.
Right. They have a historical stake. Maybe they could take the lead if the current owner can't restore it.
Seems like a reasonable suggestion. And using that building for an industrial history museum for Arad.
Sounds like a perfect fit. A place to tell the Marta story and Arad's wider industrial past. Seems much needed.
It would be fantastic. A way to preserve this legacy and share it.
Definitely. And before we wrap up, we should give credit where it's due the sources that let us have this conversation.
Crucial. Yeah.
The main document by Pushkal Peter, translated by Gabriel Roman, was key, but it drew on a lot of things. Old Chamber of Commerce reports from 1908, city histories, yearbooks, newspaper archives like the Aradi Közlöny, even articles from car magazines and museum data from Budapest.
A really solid foundation of research. Pulling together all those different threads gives us this richer picture of what happened with Marta.
It really does. So, summing up, what a story, right? Arad, this unexpected hub of early car making with Marta leading the charge.
Connected to broader European trends, facing down crises, even bumping into early aviation history.
It's just a fascinating piece of industrial history, maybe one you hadn't heard before, exactly the kind of hidden story we love uncovering in these deep dives.
And thinking bigger, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other towns or cities out there have these incredible forgotten stories of innovation just below the surface?
That is the perfect question to leave everyone with. What other local histories hold these surprising global threads, just waiting for a closer look? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.